So, were early humans cannibals? The short answer is yes. The long answer is more complicated. It's a story about survival, ritual, violence, and what it means to be human. It's a story written in bones, scratched, broken, and discarded bones found in the dirt of ancient caves. And when you look closely at these bones, they tell you things you might not want to hear. Let's get one thing straight. This isn't about a single monstrous caveman tribe that ate everyone else. It's about a behavior that shows up again and again across different continents, across different species of human, including our own. It wasn't a constant everyday thing like eating deer or berries. It was something that happened, and the reasons why it happened are what make this so interesting. To understand the story, you first have to understand how we read it. How does a scientist look at a 500,000-year-old shin bone and say someone ate this person? It comes down to forensics, just like a modern crime scene. They look for signatures. The first clue is cut marks. Stone tools leave a very specific kind of mark on bone. It's a thin V-shaped groove. Animal teeth leave a different mark, usually wider and more U-shaped. When you find those V-shaped grooves on a human bone, you know a tool was involved. And you have to ask why. The placement of these marks is also important. They often appear at the points where muscles attach to bone. This suggests someone was carefully cutting meat away from the skeleton. It's called defleshing. It's butchery. The second clue is breakage. Our long bones are full of rich fatty marrow. It's an incredible source of calories. Early humans knew this. They would break open the bones of animals to get at the marrow. They did this in a specific way, often striking the bone with a hammerstone to spiral fracture it. When you find human bones broken in exactly the same way as the deer and horse bones in the same cave layer, it's a powerful sign. They were processing the human body for food just like any other animal. A third clue is a bit more subtle. It's about what's missing, or what's left. Sometimes, archaeologists find a strange collection of human bones. For example, they might find a lot of hand and foot bones, but no long bones. Or they might find only skulls. This suggests the bodies were taken apart, and the meatiest parts were carried off somewhere else to be eaten. It's called the Schlepp effect, a term originally used for how hunters transport animal carcasses. And finally, there's evidence of cooking. Charred human bones found in a hearth are a pretty clear indicator. When you put all this together, cut marks for defleshing, systematic breakage for marrow, and signs of cooking, the case becomes very strong. This wasn't a respectful burial, this was a meal. So where do we find this evidence? The story starts a long time ago. Let's go to Spain, to a site called Gran Dolina in the Atapuerca Mountains. Here, about 800,000 years ago, lived a species of human called Homo antecessor. They might be an ancestor of both Neanderthals and us, Homo sapiens. In a deep layer of the cave, scientists found the remains of at least 11 antecessor individuals. Most of them were children or adolescents. Their bones were mixed in with the bones of bison, deer, and other hunted animals. And the human bones were treated in exactly the same way as the animal bones. They had cut marks all over them. On their ribs, their vertebrae, their leg bones, even on the tiny bones of their hands and feet. The skulls were broken apart. The long bones were smashed open for marrow. There was no ceremony here, no special treatment. These individuals were butchered and eaten. The scientists who studied the remains concluded it was nutritional cannibalism. It was about food. Maybe a rival group was killed and eaten. Maybe they were eating their own dead to survive a harsh winter. We don't know the specific scenario, but we know they were on the menu. This is some of the earliest, clearest evidence we have. It tells us that cannibalism has been part of the human story for a very, very long time. Let's move forward in time and look at our more famous relatives, the Neanderthals. For a long time, people pictured Neanderthals as brutish, simple creatures. But we now know they were incredibly sophisticated. They made complex tools, controlled fire, cared for their sick and elderly, and even buried their dead. So, were they also cannibals? Yes. And the evidence is undeniable. In a cave called Moula Gersi in France, around 100,000 years ago, a small group of Neanderthals met a violent end. Archaeologists found the remains of 6 individuals, 2 adults, 2 teenagers, and 2 children. Their bones tell a grim story. They were completely taken apart, their skulls were smashed, their tongues and brains likely eaten. Their limb bones were broken for marrow. The cut marks on their bones perfectly matched the marks on the deer bones found alongside them. The finger bones even had fine cuts on them, showing they were skinned. The conclusion was inescapable. It was a methodical, efficient butchery. It was cannibalism for food. Another site in Spain, El Cedron, gives us an even more detailed and tragic picture. Here, about 49,000 years ago, a family group of 12 Neanderthals was killed and eaten. The remains of 3 adult males, 3 adult females, 3 adolescents, and 3 younger children were found jumbled together. And genetic analysis showed they were all related. The bones had thousands of cut marks and percussion marks from hammerstones. They were processed for every last calorie. It seems they were killed and consumed by another group of Neanderthals. This was a raid, a violent, terrible event. Exocannibalism, the eating of outsiders, of enemies. And it wasn't just a one-off. At Goit Caves in Belgium, more Neanderthal bones from around 40,000 years ago show the same pattern. Cut marks, breakage, dismemberment, but there was a twist here. After the meat was stripped and the marrow was extracted, the Neanderthals used some of the bones as tools. They took a thigh bone and a few shin bones and used them as retouchers to sharpen the edges of their stone tools. This is a level of pragmatism that is both fascinating and chilling. A human body wasn't just food, its bones could be useful objects. There was no sentimentality, so we have Homo antecessor doing it, we have Neanderthals doing it. What about us? What about Homo sapiens, the wise humans? You might hope we were different, but we weren't. Let's go to England, to a place called Gough's Cave. The evidence here is more recent, from about 15,000 years ago. The people living here were modern humans, our direct ancestors. They were hunter-gatherers living at the end of the last ice age. And in their cave, they left behind a shocking record. They left the remains of at least 5 people, including a young child and 2 teenagers. The bones had been meticulously butchered. There were cut marks, chew marks, yes, human chew marks and bones smashed for marrow. But they did something else. They took the skulls and carefully cleaned them. They removed the jaw and the base and shaped the upper part of the cranium into a cup. A skull cup. 3 of these were found. They were not crude objects. They were deliberately and skillfully made. Okay, what was going on here? This doesn't seem like just survival cannibalism. The presence of the skull cups points to something else. A ritual, a ceremony. Perhaps after killing and eating their enemies, they use their skulls as drinking vessels. An act of ultimate domination. Or maybe it was part of a complex funeral rite for their own people. We can't be sure, but we know it was happening. Our own ancestors were doing it. And Gough's Cave is not an isolated case. At Herxheim in Germany, around 7,000 years ago, something truly massive happened. Archaeologists found a huge pit filled with the remains of hundreds of humans. Men, women, and children. Their bones were systematically broken and scraped clean of meat. It looks like a huge ritualized cannibalistic feast. It wasn't about starvation. The people who did this were settled farmers, not desperate hunters. Some think it was a response to a massive social crisis. A way of dealing with the dead from warfare or a plague. A violent, large-scale ritual we can barely comprehend. This behavior wasn't confined to Europe, it was global. In the American Southwest, the Anasazi people sometimes practiced cannibalism. The evidence is there in the broken, cooked, and discarded human bones found in their abandoned pueblos. In Fiji, it was a well-known part of warfare, earning the islands the name the Cannibal Isles. On Easter Island, evidence suggests it happened during times of ecological collapse and starvation. It's a recurring theme in human history and prehistory. So, this brings us to the biggest question. Why? Why would humans eat other humans? There isn't one single answer. There seem to be 3 main reasons. The first, and probably the most common in deep prehistory, is nutrition. Call it survival cannibalism or dietary cannibalism. The world of our ancestors was brutal. Starvation was a constant threat. In that context, a human body is a source of protein and fat. It's a pragmatic, if gruesome, choice. When you see human bones processed in the exact same way as animal bones, like at Grandolina and Mulagursi, this is the most likely explanation. It's not about malice or monstrosity, it's about calories. It's about making it to the next season. It could also be a way to deal with competition. Killing and eating a rival group not only eliminates a threat, but also provides a food source. The second reason is ritual. This is where things get more complex and more symbolic. Cannibalism wasn't always about hunger. It was about power, belief, and social messaging. This can be broken down further. There's endocannibalism, which is eating members of your own social group. This is often seen as a way to honor the dead. By consuming a part of a loved one, you might believe you are incorporating their spirit, their strength, or their wisdom into yourself. It's an act of reverence, not aggression. Then there's exocannibalism, which is eating outsiders or enemies. This is often an act of terror and domination. It's the ultimate insult to a defeated foe. You don't just kill them, you consume them, you absorb their power. The skull cups from Goth's cave feel like this. It's a trophy, a warning to others. It's a statement of absolute victory. The massive event at Herxheim also seems to be some form of ritual cannibalism, a response to a societal stress that we don't fully understand. The third reason is a bit different. It's aggression and violence. Sometimes the cannibalism might be the byproduct of extreme violence. Think of El Cedron. A family group is wiped out. The eating might be secondary to the act of annihilation itself, a final act of defilement. So, was it normal? Probably not in the way we think of normal. It was likely never a primary food source. Humans are hard to hunt. They don't have a lot of meat compared to a bison, and there are social consequences. But it seems to have been a recurring option. A behavior that was always there in the background, ready to emerge under the right conditions, whether that was starvation, warfare, or a specific set of cultural beliefs. There's even a hint of this long history in our genes. There is a type of disease called a prion disease. This mad cow disease is a famous one. These diseases are caused by misfolded proteins and can be transmitted by eating infected brain tissue. In humans, one such disease is called Kuru. It was documented among the 4 people of New Guinea in the 20th century. They practiced a form of endocannibalism where they would consume their dead relatives as a sign of respect. This practice led to a devastating epidemic of Kuru. What's fascinating is that scientists found that some 4 people had a genetic mutation that made them resistant to Kuru. When they looked at human genetics around the world, they found this protective gene variant in populations everywhere. The gene seems to have been positively selected for in our evolutionary past. What does that mean? It means that at some point, enough humans were eating other human brains and getting sick with prion diseases that having a gene to protect you from it gave you a survival advantage. It's a genetic echo of our species' long and sometimes cannibalistic past. The behavior was common enough to leave a mark on our very DNA. So, to come back to the beginning. Were early humans cannibals? Yes. From our ancient cousin Homo antecessor in Spain almost 1 million years ago, to the Neanderthals across Europe, to our own species, Homo sapiens, making cups from skulls in England. The evidence is clear, but it's a mistake to just label them cannibals and leave it at that. It reduces complex human beings to a single monstrous act. The story of cannibalism is the story of humanity pushed to its limits. It's about the desperate need for food in a frozen, empty world. It's about the complex rituals and beliefs we create to make sense of life and death. It's about the terrifying violence we are capable of inflicting on each other. Looking at those scratched and broken bones forces us to confront a difficult truth. The line between us and them, between the sacred human body and a simple source of protein, has not always been clear. Our ancestors were resourceful, intelligent, and social. They were also at times desperate and brutal. They were survivors, and sometimes survival meant doing the unthinkable. The story of cannibalism isn't the story of monsters. It's the story of us.